decided to do it on Robert Wadsworth Grafton. So he was an American artist, best known for his portraits of public officials, educators, professionals, as well as murals in prominent buildings across the Midwest as well in the South. He was born in Chicago. Let's see if this works. There we go. He was born in Chicago in 1876, and he began his career as an artist at the Chicago Academy of Design in the mid-1890s. Grafton continued his studies at the newly established Art Institute of Chicago, taking courses that emphasized drawing and painting fundamentals. These programs exposed him to the traditions of portraiture and landscape painting prevalent in American art circles at the time, drawing from the realist and emerging impressionist styles influenced by European techniques. Now, seeking to broaden his skills, Grafton traveled abroad from about 1895 to 1905, studying at the Académie Julian in Paris, which was a private art school, as well as in Holland and England. His time in Paris immersed him in the academic rigor of figure drawing and composition under the Atlas system, while his studies in England and Holland likely introduced him to landscape traditions inspired by masters like the Dutch school and the British portraits. These experiences shaped his approach to light and form, blending American realism with subtle impressionist elements observed in the works of contemporaries like T.C. Steele. He returned to Chicago and immersed himself in the local art community, serving as the president of the Palette and Chisel Club, the city's leading artist group, in 1906, and contributing to various artist organizations such as the Chicago Painters and Sculptors, a member of the Chicago Gallery Association, and the Chicago Artists Guild. Grafton made significant contributions to public art through large-scale murals commissioned for institutional and governmental spaces, often depicting regional history, industry, cultural themes to integrate with architectural settings. His work emphasized historical narratives and community identity, drawing on his expertise in composition and realism, honed from his early years during portraiture. These products, typically executed in oil on canvas on large murals or large panels, were designed for prominence in public buildings, reflecting his ability to scale intimate techniques into monumental formats. So we're going to take a look at a number of his murals. So in 1912, Grafton was commissioned by Dr. Edward A. Rumley to paint a series of murals to hang in the lobby of the Hotel Romney, which is in LaPorte, Indiana. As the Romney family was involved in architectural implement business, the 11 panels showed Grafton's conception of the industrial progress of the present century in comparison with former periods, showing what has been able to accomplish by man and the work performed by man. Grafton's murals covered the entire wall space in the hotel's lobby. 3 of the murals depicted historical methods of wheat farming, and 3 illustrated new methods of harvesting. 2 murals depicted the foundry and blacksmith shop of the Romney Company, which is what this example is here on the slide. And then 1 mural depicts a landscape of LaPorte in the distance, and 2 smaller murals show old and new ways of plowing. The murals hung in the lobby of the Hotel Romney until 1976, when they were removed to the William Hammond Mathers Museum in Bloomington. 5 of them were restored and exhibited there. In 2002, Dr. and Mrs. Peter Kessling acquired these 5 restored murals and displayed them in the Kessling Door Prairie Auto Museum. These murals remained on display at the LaPorte County Historical Society Museum, the former home of the Door Prairie Auto Museum. And an additional 8 murals were also acquired but remain in storage. Now, when I was doing research on here, unfortunately, this was the only picture I could find of any of the murals. And so, I'm sure we're missing quite a bit on the sides of what the actual end result is. Now our next one was painted in 1914. It's a 9-foot wide mural by Grafton, depicts the library's namesake, Charles Eckert, and it's of the Civil War Battle of Fair Oaks in Virginia in 1862, which he was at. Eckert's son Morris had it commissioned by Grafton, and it took Grafton 3 months to paint, and it was all done in his Michigan City studio. The mural survived a devastating arson fire in the library in July of 2017, and as part of the fire recovery, library officials brought in an art conservationist from New York. The portrait to the left of Charles Eckert is actually one that Grafton also did during his early work of portraiture when he was showcasing things in Fort Wayne area. So this one was done in 1915, and is originally was in the Flower Hotel lobby, had in a massive space with this large mural depicting the Battle of Tippecanoe, and it's 48 feet wide. So thank goodness we don't have this one. But by the late 20th century, the structure fell into decay and disrepair, and in 1960s, the mural was suffering from neglect, and it was taken out of the hotel in 1966 and was brought to the Tippecanoe County Courthouse, where it was restored and remains today. And so, again, the only image I found was a partial of it. It's actually hanging in a long hallway at the courthouse. So if you want to go see it, you can. But as you can see, very similar to like the ones that we have, which we'll see on as we continue. But by 1914, Grafton relocated to Michigan City from Chicago, but he spent his winters in New Orleans. So Grafton and his friend and fellow Indiana artist, Louis Oscar Griffin, often visited New Orleans in the early 20th century and were captivated by the historic buildings and waterways that made up the city and its lively art community, which was largely centered in the French quarters. The two of them were actually organizers of the first arts classes in New Orleans as well. So they made their mark there when they were residing and visiting. With thick, lush brushwork, Grafton's beautifully renders the reflection of the boats in the waters of this impressionist painting of the New Basin Canal, which you see to your left, that was painted in 1918. And then the other example is, again, as I said, he liked the historic buildings and just the natural scenes that they saw. But one of Grafton's most notable early public commissions came in 1917 when he collaborated again with Griffin on murals for the St. Charles Hotel. It's the historic one that was demolished in 1974, not the current one that there's today. And it was, the murals hung in their second floor gallery. They depicted vibrant New Orleans scenes like Mardi Gras. And then they also captured the port city's vibrant urban life and regional character during the winter residency from 1914 to 1918. Grafton and Griffin's New Orleans works were also shown at the St. Charles Hotel in 1917 exhibit, and the prints were featured in hotel souvenirs and postcards, which, according to eBay, you can still purchase those online, but they depict all the different murals and stuff that he painted. So the following year, in 1918, he completed 3 large murals for the legislative balconies of the Illinois State House in Springfield, Illinois, as part of the state's centennial celebration, and these depict commerce, agriculture, and industry, symbolizing key aspects of regional development, and were installed to enhance the capital's architecture grandeur, which I mentioned that he would often, kind of work with this space, which this is a great example of that. These Illinois works exemplifies his approach to site-specific integration, where murals served as educational and patriotic functions in government spaces. And these were actually restored not too long ago. So these are great examples. Now our next ones are, if you're from Ruthmere or been here, you've probably seen these, and as well as you walked in. So these hung in the First National Bank. Some research had showed it, they were from about 1923, 1924. Could be a little bit later in time. But they hung, as I said, in the lobby. So the first one is the building of the first dam over the Elkhart River, which now resides at the Havilah Beardsley House. And then the second one is the early traffic and commerce of the St. Joseph River. And this one, if you saw, is actually on the other side of the wall there. It resided for many years in the garage at Ruthmere, but back in, October? We walked it down here. So that was a fun little walk down the neighborhood. I'm sure we turned quite a few heads as we went through. But it makes more sense to have both of them down here, since they kind of reflect. You've got the Beardsley flour mill in this one, and so more eyes on it, and the cars can have their own purpose now, being down there in the garage. But Grafton was known to do studies of his pieces before he did the final one. And so we also own these two studies that are found in the garage. One is on the first floor when you walk in behind the Pratt, and then the other one is upstairs in the Art Reference Library. You can see subtle changes from the studies to the final piece, but there are other ones I saw on an auction of this mural, of ones that aren't this, are different sections of it. And then he also did the study of the one that we have here now, which we have the study on the racks out there if you saw it. And then, this one you can actually see, his autograph or his signature in the bottom corner of it. The next one, you can see the two. So you can see the slight variation. Someone, I don't know who it was saying, was like, in the study you don't have the Native Americans behind the trees. Same with, the detail of the faces isn't that great because, it wasn't the final shot of it. But it's very interesting, I think, to see, his thinking and how it evolved to the final project. And then in 1925, Grafton painted this mural, which is often referred to as the Grafton mural, and it depicts LaPorte County with a lakefront scene of Michigan City during the mid-1800s and was commissioned by the Rotary Club of Michigan City. And you can see that it depicts goods being hauled by oxen at the lakefront, as well as them loading it on their backs, carrying it along. But the left side of the mural depicts the Hoosier Slide. It's a sand dune that stood where the NIPSCO generating plant is now. I thought that was interesting because I didn't know what it was. But this one I like just because you've got the side murals, continuing on the scene. But this mural, as you can see, is in 3 pieces. It's 400 pounds. The center canvas measures 32 feet by 10 feet, and then the smaller ones measure 4 feet by 10. It covered the east wall of the 3rd floor study hall at the Elston High School in 1925 until it was removed for restoration in 1979, which you can see in the top photo is of it in the study hall. You know, I'm sure many students passed it by or looked at it, just probably never thought of anything, but you know, it probably stuck in their mind because the mural was preserved at a cost of about $10,000, which was funded in part by contributions from several class reunions of former Elston students. So it did make, you know, a lasting impression. It was rehung in 1984 above the north entrance of the Easton Performing Arts Building, which is now known as the Holcraft Performing Arts Center. And then in 2004, the mural was once again relocated and now graces the Detroit Street entrance at the Elston Building, which is what you see now. So Grafton moves on a little bit into Kansas in 1928 to do this project here. So the later commissions that featured Grafton's public impact are like this one from 1928, murals at the Pioneer Hall at Kansas Wesleyan University in Salina, Kansas, and it tailored to educational themes, as well as a mural that he did in 1935-1936 at the Tulane University in New Orleans. I couldn't find a picture of that one, but both of them, his techniques favored oil on large canvases for flexibility in transport and installation, allowing seamless architectural harmony while prioritizing narrative depth over the fresco permanence, though he occasionally adapted to the site demands. But as you can see, this one depicts pioneers arriving by wagon. But these works, funded by civic organization, banks, and state entities, positioned Grafton as a key figure in the early 20th century American public art, fostering community engagement through accessible historical storytelling, which is what I like about his. You know, we even use our mural over at the Havilah Beardsley House for like school groups to have them do like a study piece to talk about. But now that we've looked at some of Grafton's murals, let's turn our focus on what he was actually best known for, which I wasn't aware of, which is his portraits. His use of colors are cold and gray, a sharp contrast to his murals that we've seen. Some say his lack of execution and coloring makes his portraits lose their impact. I'm not quite so sure I agree with it. I think it's just one's personal taste. He painted 6 governors, of which his most notable, and from research, what he was most proud of, are the portraits depicting the 3 governors from Indiana and 2 U.S. presidents. Now, the 3 Indiana governors you can see are William T. McCrae, Ed Jackson, and Harry G. Leslie. The McCrae portrait bears no date, but is said to have been painted in 1927, 3 years after McCrae submitted his resignation as governor. And it's a very frank portrait of the governor. The portrait of Governor Ed Jackson was the second one done by Grafton and was painted midway in Jackson's administration in 1927. It was made at the Dune State Park. Jackson was greatly impressed by the unique beauty of the Indiana dunes, and during his administration, the property was acquired by the state for a park, and he was proud of that fact. And his enthusiasm for that was also shared by Grafton, and so they believed that it was a very pleasant experience while he was painting this. And then the third portrait by Grafton in the State House is that of Harry G. Leslie. It was painted in 1929, during the governor's first years in office. The technique, like the other ones that we've seen, is deliberate. The colors are dark, but you can see here he does use a deep red for the necktie and kind of more rosy cheeks to kind of draw your eye in that way. But, you know, quite different from the murals that we're used to. He also did some governors of Michigan. The one to the left is of Fred Green, painted in 1931. In creating this piece, Grafton pulled from his earlier landscape styles as well as current artistic trends. The muted pastel colors in the sky, the rich warm tones of the leaves, and the shades of green in the foreground are similar to American landscapes like those of the Hudson River School. Though his style is more traditional than his contemporaries, Grafton chooses again to predict the rural Midwest, which he loved to do in his paintings. The Chase Osborne and Edwin Denby portraits are very similar to the Indiana artists that we saw already. Now, the two U.S. presidents that Grafton painted were Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover. And records indicate that both presidents sat for the painter while they were in the White House. The Hoover one, I could not find an image of that at all. But the one of Coolidge here you can see is the one that he did. And it kind of has a fascinating story behind it. And so Coolidge sat for Grafton in the White House in 1929 for a portrait that was to join the Saddle and Sirloin collection. So this club was of influential figures in the livestock industry that were originally housed at the top floor of the Purebred Livestock Records building in Chicago in the early 1900s. Livestock men would gather at the top floor over a sirloin dinner, a steak, or a saddle of lamb at the buffet, leading to the name Saddle and Sirloin Club. Now, Coolidge was serving as the 13th president of the United States from 1923 to 1929, and he was actually the first president to ever visit the International Livestock Exposition. So they're the ones that had this commissioned to hang. So usually, Grafton was able to conquer his subjects quickly and complete them at quite a surprising rate. However, when it came to the Coolidge, he kind of hit a brick wall. He struggled to translate Coolidge from multiple sessions, all without any success. And he was becoming quite frustrated that he wasn't able to accomplish it and thought he was going to fail doing this this painting here. So just days before Coolidge was to leave office, Grafton faced one last chance to paint this or, admit defeat. So Coolidge had patiently given the artist plenty of time, but Grafton's high expectations on himself, combined with Coolidge's modesty, left him unsettled and flustered as he came to the White House for his last try. So Grafton was staying at a local hotel, and he confided in a Secret Service man named Colonel Starling. And so this is an excerpt from what Starling said that happened. The sittings were being held in the northwest room of the second floor. It was bright, clear, beautiful day when Grafton made his final effort. The president came in and went into to a little platform on which his chair was set. He looked out the window at the sunshine and said to Grafton, "Good morning. It might rain." Grafton was so shaken that he upset a can of turpentine. As he watched it spread over the beautiful rug covering the floor, despair completely engulfed him. He said, "Oh, Mr. President, I am so sorry," he said. "Please have the rug sent to the cleaners and I will gladly pay the bill." "Now, don't worry about that old rug," he said. "I'm going to move out of here in a few days." Grafton stared and then relaxed and smiled. Without a word, he seized the brush and began to paint. The spell was broken, the problem solved. Grafton finished his work in a short time and did a grand job. He, quote, he caught the little fella exactly, half owl, half elf, end of quote. So we're going to go back to the saddle and sirloin portrait collection. And so there are more works at this collection that were painted by Grafton than any other artist. There are over 160 that he painted. He became the official Saddle and Sirloin Club portraitist around 1915 and was later commissioned to repaint the portraits that were destroyed by the Chicago Union Stockyard fires of 1934, which was up the picture at the top. Now, this was the second most destructive fire in the city's history after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 in terms of property damage and buildings lost. So for the last 2 years of Grafton's life, he painted with tremendous speed, returning the 160 of the lost portraits to Chicago and painting 2 more new inductees during the same period. So these are just some of the ones that he did repaint. Now his signature is only visible on one, and that is the likeness of Frederick Pabst Sr. And then the portrait on your right is the self-portrait by Grafton that he did that now hangs in honor of his accomplishments and his contributions to the club. No? But sadly, one of the portraits that was in the fire was the one of Coolidge. But as fate have it, he was actually, able to replicate it. The replacement doesn't equal the original in art historical value, but the artist's knowledge of the subject certainly helped, even though it was just a few years since he had painted it. Now, in 1976, the collection moved to the Kentucky Exhibition Center in Louisville, home of the North American International Livestock Exhibition. So if you're ever down that way, you can take a look at these. Now, Grafton produced a significant body of landscapes and genre paintings throughout his career, complementing his better-known portraits and murals. He captured Midwestern regional environments and scenes of everyday life, reflecting the regional character of the American heartland. His work was emphasized on rural and urban fringes, drawing his deep ties to the Midwest. Grafton's genre paintings depicted daily activities of ordinary people, such as laborers, fishermen, homemakers, influenced by the regional realism of the Dutch and English rural traditions that he encountered during his European travels. These subjects underscored themes of labor and leisure in small-town America. His style evolved from impressionist approaches in his early work, shaped by training abroad, towards more detailed, narrative-driven compositions by the 1920s. This shift is evident with his loose brushwork giving way to structural storytelling in later genre scenes. Landscapes such as those from New Orleans incorporated reflective waters and architectural elements, though his Midwestern output focused on open farmlands and lakefronts near his Indiana base. So Grafton's non-portrait works were frequently exhibited and sold through the Chicago institutions, which enhanced his visibility for regional art circles. He showed landscapes and genre pieces at the Art Institute of Chicago in 1907 to 1918, including multiple entries into annual expositions, and held a one-man show of similar subjects at the Tharbird Art Galleries in the 1917-1918 season. Participation in the Hoosier Salon 1925 to 1929 led to awards like the Leroy Gallard Prize, and also exhibited at the Paris Salon, the Indiana Art Association in 1908, the Brooks Memorial Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, and the Richmond Artists Association, where he won prizes in 1910 and 1919. In 1933, Grafton was awarded an honorary doctor's degree of fine arts by the Kansas Wesleyan University. While sales records indicate steady demand, auction prices for his genre in landscape oils range from several hundred to over $60,000 in recent decades. Now, Grafton died of a heart attack in Michigan City at the age of 59 in 1936, just 2 days before his 60th birthday. The Chicago Daily Tribune reported that the repainting project contributed to Robert Grafton's early death, as his intense schedule left him little time to rest. But we are lucky to have some great examples here in Ruthmere's collection, and we are good stewards of seeing that his legacy lives on. So at this time, you're more than welcome to look at the murals we have. If you want to go see the one at Havilah, we can walk over there as well. But thank you guys. Now.